Hey folks, Lucas here. As promised, we're in the shop today making the nose cone for the Landers AL6. It's aluminum cast with a traditional sand mold process. As with any sand mold, a pattern is required. I 3D print most of my patterns. I don't want to go into the nuances of printing, but once the part comes off the printer, I sand it, Bondo, and then sand it again. I repeat this process till it's silky smooth. So, without further ado, let's get packing. I'm using Petrobond. It's a sand oil mix that's great at holding complex forms. Some other tools of the trade include a sifter, a big spoon, a thin walled pipe, and a piece of wood. And then there's the flask. This is basically two wooden boxes that can only go together one way. Off camera, I gave the pattern a relaxing bath in baby powder. Using the sifter, I apply a layer of fresh sand. I pack this by hand around the pattern and then start filling up the rest of the mold. Every few inches I pack the sand with my piece of wood, but you don't have to go overboard as this isn't a very detailed pattern. I pack it till it's overflowing and then strike off the top to make it smooth. I clean up the area and then flip her over. I cover all exposed surfaces with a layer of baby powder. Then, using an air blaster and a brush, I spread the powder around. I make sure to pay attention to the inside of the pattern. This is going to be a real weak point in this mold, and I don't want to take any chances. I throw on the other half of the flask and then, once again, I use the sifter to apply a fresh layer of sand. And then I fill the rest of her up. With both halves of the mold now packed, I can cut a sprue. For this I use that thin-walled pipe I mentioned earlier. To guarantee success, I flip the mold over. This reduces stress on the inside of that cone. A few light taps of the hammer loosen the mold, and very gently I lift straight up. First impressions, everything looks good. There's a small defect near the base of the cone, but that won't matter because we'll be cutting the gate through it. Using an old machinist ruler, I cut the gates. I like using a machinist ruler because it's thin, flexible, has a curved end on one side and a straight edge on the other. It's really the perfect tool for doing this kind of stuff. The pattern can now be removed, and I commence cleaning up the mold. I use an air blaster to blow away all loose particles. This is very important as a single grain can throw off the cast. Lastly, I use a thin wooden dowel to cut an air hole opposite the sprue. This is going to help the liquid metal flow and fill up the entire mold. With that, the two halves can be remated and the sand mold is now complete. All this time the kiln has been heating up, and the crucible is now ready to accept aluminum. This is a 5 kilogram crucible, and I'm going to be filling it up to the brim for this pour. You may have noticed that I keep a lot of sand around. This is for safety reasons. I must make it very clear not to use water when dealing with such high temperatures. It can literally explode. Sand can safely contain a spill without causing any damage to your external body parts. And trust me, making cameras is much easier when you have the use of all of your fingers. With the aluminum melted, I season with table salt and give it a good stir with a graphite stick. And now the moment you've been waiting for, it's time to make the pour. It's best practice to do it as quickly and as smoothly as possible. So just like that, it's done. Now all I have to do is wait for it to cool. The first thing I notice about the mold is it does not smell very good. That's the Petrobond burning. But the pour seems to have been successful. So I quickly cut the gate off with a handsaw, and you know what, everything looks pretty good. There's some small pitting on the outside of the cone and some flashing near the edges, but these were to be expected. So what we're going to do now is take it to the lathe and turn it down to dimension. Be warned though, when machining cast parts, make sure to clean off all the sand. Sand can be very damaging to precision machines. A single grain can cause a lot of damage. So at the lathe, there is a problem. I can't hold the part on the outside, as all surfaces must be machined. And because of the taper, I can't hold it on the inside. So what can I do? Well, there's a lot of options, but I'm going to go with the infinitely useful superglue arbor. This particular superglue arbor I've made from aluminum scrap. It solves all of my problems, and it's quick and easy. So first I slap the 4-jaw chuck on, get the superglue arbor centered. I apply a generous amount of superglue to the part, and as long as I take it easy, this will be more than enough. With the nose cone attached, I run a second centering operation just to be sure. But when designing the pattern, I gave myself plenty of room, so I only had to be within 10 or 20 thou. And now it's finally time to let the chips fly. First, I tackle the bulk of aluminum left over by the gate. There's going to be a lot of intermittent contact with the tool, so I'm using a very sharp cutter and taking light passes. Intermittent contact is a superglue arbor's worst nightmare. I turn the taper using the cross slide. And I make sure to use lots of WD-40 as a lubricant. Off camera I do a facing cut, and then I drill and bore the front of the nose cone to accept the lens. With all the machining done, I can now really make this part shine. I work up the grits all the way to 1000 and make sure to use plenty of oil. Some heat from a blowtorch breaks the superglue bond, and this part's now finished. Overall, I'm very satisfied with the way this part turned out. The surface finish on the outside is quite nice. There's no tool marks. Near the base there are a few small casting defects, but these will be obscured once put into the main body. The inside is left as it is, as the matte texture is great at absorbing light. And there you have it. That's the nose cone for the Landers AL6. We've taken a 3D printed pattern all the way to a finished machined part. Next week I'll be tackling something a little bit simpler, the tripod mount. If you found this interesting, I hope you like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll try to help you out. So I hope to see you next time.